In 1918, the German government sent an official diplomatic protest to the United States. They demanded that America stop using a specific weapon. They called it a violation of the laws of war. They threatened to execute any American prisoner caught carrying one. The weapon in question was not a new type of poison gas. It was not an artillery shell. It was not some secret experimental device. It was a shotgun. A pump-action shotgun designed for hunting ducks. The same country that introduced chlorine gas to the battlefield. The same army that used flamethrowers to burn men alive in their trenches. The same military that equipped its soldiers with saw-toothed bayonets designed to tear flesh rather than cut it cleanly. That country filed a formal complaint about a hunting weapon, and they were serious, dead serious. The story of the Winchester Model 1897 is one of the strangest in military history. How an ordinary sporting gun became so terrifying that an empire tried to have it banned and failed. The Winchester Model 1897 was designed by John Moses Browning, the same man who would later create the M1911 pistol and the Browning automatic rifle. He designed it for hunters, for shooting birds and small game. It was meant for farms and fields, not battlefields. The gun held 6 shells in its tubular magazine. Each shell contained 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot. Each pellet was .33 caliber, roughly the same diameter as a 9mm bullet. One pull of the trigger sent 9 projectiles downrange simultaneously, but that was just one shot. Here is where the Winchester became something else entirely. The Model 1897 had no trigger disconnector. Most modern shotguns require you to release the trigger between shots. This one did not. If you held down the trigger and pumped the action, it fired immediately, every time. This was called slam fire. A trained soldier could empty all 6 rounds in approximately 2 seconds. 54 lead pellets in the air almost instantaneously. Soldiers learned to fire from the hip, pumping the action as fast as their arms could move. The recoil became part of the rhythm. The gun weighed 8 pounds, about 3.5 kilograms. Its effective range was 20 to 30 meters. In an open field, that would be a limitation. In a trench 4 feet wide with walls on both sides, it was perfect. The Germans would give it names: trench sweeper, trench broom, names that described exactly what it did to a narrow corridor full of men. If you are finding this story interesting, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. A like genuinely helps this channel tell more stories like this one. It takes 2 seconds. Now, back to 1917, because here is the question. The Winchester Model 1897 had existed for 20 years before America entered the First World War. It sat in gun shops and farmhouses across the country. Millions of Americans used it to hunt birds. So how did a duck gun end up in the trenches of France? And who decided to put it there? That decision came from a general who had seen what shotguns could do. Years before, on the other side of the world, General John Joseph Pershing had a nickname: Blackjack. He earned it commanding African-American cavalry units in the American West. By 1917, he was the most experienced combat commander in the United States Army, and he remembered the Philippines. In 1900, American forces were fighting the Moro people in the southern islands. The Moro were Muslim warriors. Some of them practiced a form of ritual combat called juramentado. They would bind their limbs with tight cloth to slow bleeding, say their prayers, and charge American positions with bladed weapons. Their goal was to kill as many enemies as possible before dying. Standard army rifles were not stopping them. A Moro warrior could take multiple bullet wounds and keep coming. Officers started looking for something with more immediate effect. They found it in shotguns. A blast of buckshot at close range did what rifle bullets could not. It ended charges. It stopped attackers who seemed immune to individual bullets. Pershing saw this. He noted it. He filed it away. 16 years later, he saw it again. In 1916, Pershing led American forces into Mexico, chasing the revolutionary Pancho Villa. The campaign was frustrating. Villa's men knew the terrain. They ambushed and vanished. When American troops did catch up with them, the fighting was close and fast. Once again, shotguns proved effective, not for long-range engagements, for the sudden violent moments when enemies appeared at close quarters. Then, in April 1917, America declared war on Germany. Pershing was given command of the American Expeditionary Forces. He would lead 2 million men to France, and he knew what was waiting for them. He had read the reports: trench warfare, narrow passages, hand-to-hand combat in confined spaces, raids in darkness, exactly the kind of fighting where his shotguns had worked before. He wanted them, but hunting shotguns were not military weapons. They needed modifications. In September 1917, an engineer from Georgia named William G. Eager submitted a report. Eager had studied the problem. He proposed taking commercial shotguns and adapting them for trench warfare. Add a ventilated metal handguard so soldiers could grip a hot barrel. Add a bayonet mount so the gun could be used for stabbing when ammunition ran out. Shorten the barrel for easier movement in tight spaces. The Army accepted the proposal. Winchester received contracts. So did Remington. The Model 1897 became the Model 1897 trench gun. By June 1918, the Army had allocated 50 shotguns to every division heading to France. The number seemed small, 50 guns per division, but the Army did not intend to arm entire units with shotguns. They selected specific soldiers, men who had hunted birds back home, men who understood how to lead a moving target, men who could pump and fire without thinking. They called them shotgunners, and they sent them into the trenches of the Western Front. The Germans had been fighting for 4 years. They had seen every weapon the British and French could throw at them: machine guns, artillery, tanks, gas. They had never seen anything like what came next. A trench on the Western Front was not a battlefield. It was a maze. Narrow passages carved into mud and clay. Some sections were 4 feet wide, some were less. Corners every few meters, blind turns, dead ends, dugouts carved into the walls where men slept and waited. When soldiers went over the top, they crossed open ground under machine gun fire. But when they reached the enemy trench, the nature of combat changed completely. Rifles became awkward. They were designed for accuracy at hundreds of meters. In a corridor where you could touch both walls with outstretched arms, accuracy did not matter. Speed did. The Winchester Model 1897 was built for exactly this environment. 20 to 30 meters of effective range, in a trench that was 3 or 4 corners ahead, far enough to hit enemies before they could close the distance, close enough that the spread of buckshot filled the passage. A rifle bullet could miss. A pistol required precise aim under stress. A shotgun blast spread to nearly a meter wide at 20 meters. In a 4-foot corridor, missing was almost impossible. And then there was the rate of fire. A bolt-action rifle required the shooter to work the bolt between each shot. Aim, fire, cycle, aim again. A trained soldier could manage perhaps 15 rounds per minute. A shotgunner with a Winchester could put 54 projectiles into a trench section in 2 seconds. The mathematics were horrifying. One contemporary account described what happened when German assault troops encountered American shotgunners. The Americans let them approach. Then the shotguns opened fire. 200 men firing, 6 rounds each, reloading, firing again. The account stated that the front ranks of the assault simply piled up on top of one awful heap of buckshot-drilled men. The Germans had a word for it. They started calling the Americans something that would stick: Teufelhunde, devil dogs. Some historians dispute whether the term originated at Belleau Wood in June 1918. But the Marines who fought there were carrying Winchesters, and the Germans who faced them were terrified. The shotgunners developed tactics that seemed impossible. Some of them had been competitive trap shooters before the war. They had spent years shooting clay pigeons launched into the air at unpredictable angles. Now, they used that skill for something else. German soldiers threw stick grenades. The grenades had a 5-second fuse. A trap shooter could track a grenade in flight, lead the target, fire. There are accounts of shotgunners blasting grenades out of the air before they could land, knocking them back toward the enemy lines, using a hunting skill to turn explosives into a deadly game. The trench gun earned its names: sweeper, broom, tools for clearing spaces. The soldiers who carried them became specialists, hunters in a maze of mud, and the German high command noticed. Long before the famous diplomatic protest of 1918, concerns were being raised. As early as December 1914, Germany had already complained about shotguns. That was before America even entered the war, before a single American soldier set foot in France. They saw what was coming, and they were already afraid. But fear was about to turn into something else: desperation. The first German complaint about American shotguns came in December 1914. Think about that date for a moment. December 1914. The United States would not declare war on Germany until April 1917. American troops would not arrive in France in significant numbers until 1918. And yet, more than 2 years before a single American soldier fired a shot in the Great War, Germany was already protesting. They had seen shotguns used by American forces in the Philippines. They had read reports from Mexico. They knew what Pershing knew, and they wanted the weapons banned before they ever reached European soil. The complaint went nowhere. America was neutral. There was no battlefield to discuss. But the Germans had made their position clear. They considered shotguns barbaric, uncivilized, a violation of the rules of warfare. The irony was extraordinary. By December 1914, Germany had already used poison gas experimentally on the Eastern Front. Within months, they would release chlorine gas at Ypres, killing thousands of French and Algerian soldiers. They were developing flamethrowers that would cook men alive in their positions. Their standard issue bayonet had saw teeth on the back edge, designed to create wounds that could not be stitched closed. But the shotgun was too much. By the summer of 1918, American forces were fully engaged on the Western Front, and the shotguns had arrived with them. June 1918, Belleau Wood, a forest that would become legend in Marine Corps history. The Germans held fortified positions in the trees, machine gun nests, overlapping fields of fire. The French had already tried and failed to take it. The Marines attacked, and some of them carried Winchesters. The fighting in Belleau Wood lasted nearly a month. It was close combat in dense forest, exactly the environment where a trench gun excelled. The Germans fought hard. They were experienced soldiers who had held that ground for years. But something was different about these Americans. Reports began filtering back to German command. American shotgunners were clearing positions that should have held. Soldiers who had survived years of French and British attacks were being overwhelmed in seconds. The blast of buckshot was cutting through the undergrowth, hitting multiple targets with single shots. German soldiers began making a calculation. If they saw a shotgunner approaching, they had two choices: fight and face 54 projectiles in 2 seconds, or surrender. Many chose surrender. The psychological effect was becoming as powerful as the physical one. German soldiers knew what rifle fire sounded like. They knew machine guns. They knew artillery. The boom of a shotgun was different, deeper, closer, and it meant someone was coming through the trench to kill them at close range. By September 1918, the war was turning decisively against Germany. Their spring offensive had failed. American troops were arriving faster than they could be killed. The end was coming. And then, in a village somewhere on the Western Front, a single American sergeant decided to do something that should have been impossible. His name was Fred Lloyd, and he had a Winchester. September 1918. The Western Front was collapsing for Germany. The 100 Days Offensive was grinding forward. Allied forces were pushing through villages and towns that had been behind German lines for 4 years. In one of those villages, a German garrison was holding position. The exact location is lost to history. The exact number of German soldiers is not recorded. What is recorded is what happened next. Sergeant Fred Lloyd advanced into the village alone. He carried a Winchester Model 1897, 6 shells in the magazine, pockets full of ammunition. He moved down the main street of the village, not with a squad, not with covering fire from a machine gun team, alone, and he started clearing buildings. The accounts describe his technique in 2 words: pumping and firing. He would approach a position, work the action, pull the trigger, work the action, pull the trigger, the rhythm of slam fire echoing off stone walls. One man walked through an occupied village and came out the other side. Think about what that means. A garrison of trained soldiers, men with rifles and machine guns, men who had survived 4 years of the deadliest war in human history, and one American with a shotgun walked through them. The Winchester gave him something no other weapon could: speed and volume of fire that a single soldier could not match with any other infantry weapon. A rifle required aiming each shot. A pistol held limited ammunition. A shotgun with slam fire could fill a room with lead before the occupants could react. Fred Lloyd became a legend. His action was reported up the chain of command. It spread among American units as proof of what the trench gun could do, and the Germans heard about it too. After the war, a journalist named Peter P. Carney tried to explain why the shotgun had become so feared. Carney was editor of the National Sports Syndicate, a man who understood firearms and hunting. He had watched the trench gun transform from sporting equipment to instrument of terror. He wrote that the shotgun was America's greatest contribution to the war, greater than the millions of fresh troops, greater than the industrial production. The shotgun carried more terrors into the hearts of the enemy than any other instrument of destruction. And then he added a line that captured the German fear perfectly: the only umbrella that will assist anyone when the trench shotgun is showering pellets over the universe is an armored tank. An armored tank. That was what it took to feel safe from a weapon designed to shoot ducks. By mid-September 1918, German commanders had reached a breaking point. Their soldiers were terrified. Their defensive positions were being cleared by shotgunners. Their morale was cracking. They decided to act. On September 19, 1918, the German government took an extraordinary step. They sent an official diplomatic protest through the Swiss embassy. They invoked international law. They made demands. And they made a threat that no nation had made in the entire war. They threatened to execute prisoners. The document arrived at the United States State Department through official channels. The Swiss embassy served as the intermediary. Switzerland was neutral. They carried messages between nations that were trying to kill each other. The protest was formal, legalistic, and unprecedented. The German government invoked Article 23, Section E of the Hague Convention of 1907. The article prohibited weapons calculated to cause unnecessary suffering. Germany argued that shotgun wounds met this definition: multiple projectiles tearing through flesh simultaneously, wounds that were difficult or impossible to treat, suffering beyond what was militarily necessary. The language of the protest was precise, cold, and terrifying. The German government protests against the use of shotguns by the American army and calls attention to the fact that according to the law of war, every prisoner found to have in his possession such guns or ammunition belonging thereto forfeits his life. Read that last part again. Forfeits his life. Germany was not threatening to treat captured shotgunners as criminals. They were not threatening imprisonment, or military tribunal. They were threatening summary execution. Any American soldier captured with a shotgun would be shot. Any American soldier captured with shotgun shells in his pockets would be shot. No trial, no appeal. No other weapon in the entire war had prompted such a threat. Not machine guns that could kill hundreds in minutes. Not artillery that erased entire battalions. Not poison gas that left men drowning in the fluid from their own lungs. Not flamethrowers that burned soldiers alive in their trenches. Only the shotgun. The protest included a deadline. Germany demanded an American response by October 1st, 1918. 12 days. If the United States did not agree to withdraw shotguns from service, Germany would begin executions. The calculation behind the protest was clear. Germany was losing. The war would be over in weeks or months, but they had hundreds of thousands of Allied prisoners. If they could force America to abandon the shotgun, they could die with at least one small victory. And there was a darker logic as well. German soldiers were surrendering when they saw shotgunners approaching. If captured Americans faced execution for carrying shotguns, perhaps American soldiers would stop carrying them. Fear could work in both directions. The protest landed on the desk of Secretary of State Robert Lansing. Lansing was a lawyer by training, precise, methodical, not easily intimidated. He read the German demands. He consulted with military legal advisors. Brigadier General Samuel T. Ansel was tasked with preparing the official response. Ansel was the acting Judge Advocate General of the Army. His job was to determine whether American weapons violated international law. He studied the Hague Convention. He examined the specifications of the Winchester. He reviewed the German arguments. And he started building a counterattack. The deadline was October 1st. The response would need to be ready in days, and it would need to be more than a refusal. It would need to be a message. Germany had threatened American lives. America was about to threaten right back. The American response arrived before the deadline. It was not an apology. It was not a negotiation. It was a legal demolition of the German position. Brigadier General Samuel T. Ansel laid out the argument with precision. The Hague Convention prohibited weapons causing unnecessary suffering. The key word was unnecessary. All weapons cause suffering. The question was whether that suffering served a legitimate military purpose. Ansel pointed out that shotgun wounds were not fundamentally different from wounds caused by other accepted weapons. Shrapnel from artillery shells created multiple wound channels. Machine gun fire could strike a soldier many times in seconds. If multiple projectiles were the standard for war crimes, then half the weapons on the Western Front would be illegal. But the American response did not stop at legal technicalities. Secretary Lansing authorized a direct counterattack. If Germany wanted to discuss weapons that caused unnecessary suffering, America had a list. Chlorine gas. Germany had introduced it at Ypres in April 1915. Men died choking on their own fluids. Survivors suffered lung damage for the rest of their lives. Germany had signed the Hague Convention and then released poison into the wind. Phosgene, even deadlier than chlorine, almost odorless. By the time soldiers realized they were exposed, the damage was done. They drowned from the inside. Flamethrowers. German Flammenwerfer units had burned men alive in their trenches since 1915. The screaming could be heard for hundreds of meters. Sawtooth bayonets, standard German issue, designed to create wounds that could not be closed, designed to maximize bleeding. The American message was clear. You lecture us about a hunting shotgun, while your soldiers carry weapons designed for maximum cruelty. The argument is over. And then came the threat. If Germany executes a single American prisoner for carrying a shotgun, the United States will retaliate. The specifics were left unstated. They did not need to be stated. Germany had American prisoners. America had German prisoners. The mathematics of vengeance were simple. Germany blinked. Not a single American soldier was executed for carrying a shotgun. Not one. The threat evaporated. The protest became a footnote. 44 days after the German protest, the war ended. November 11th, 1918. The guns fell silent. But the Winchester Model 1897 did not retire. 23 years later, December 1941, Pearl Harbor. America was at war again. This time in the Pacific, the jungle fighting of Guadalcanal, the island hopping campaigns, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, close combat in dense vegetation, bunkers, caves, tunnels. Exactly the environment where a shotgun excelled. Marines remembered what their fathers had carried. They requested Winchesters. They stole them from Navy ships before amphibious landings. Whatever it took to get their hands on trench guns. On Guadalcanal in 1942, Major General Alexander Patch led an attack personally. Not with a pistol, not with a carbine, with a Winchester shotgun. A general in the jungle with a duck gun. On August 17, 1942, Sergeant Clyde Thomason used his Winchester to assault Japanese positions on Makin Island. He was one of the first American heroes of the Pacific War. The weapon Germany tried to ban was still killing enemies a generation later. The Winchester Model 1897 remained in American military service for nearly a century, from the Philippine insurrection in 1900 to the jungles of Vietnam in the 1960s. Some units carried shotguns into the 1990s. Almost 100 years of continuous service. More than 1 million Model 1897s were manufactured between 1897 and 1957. By the end of World War II, the American military had purchased approximately 500,000 shotguns of all types. The weapon that Germany tried to outlaw became standard equipment. Marines developed a ritual. Before amphibious landings, they would raid the armories of Navy ships. Shotguns were supposed to be allocated through official channels. Marines did not wait for official channels. They took what they needed. Officers looked the other way. Everyone knew what waited on those beaches. Korea, Vietnam. The shotgun followed American soldiers into every conflict. The tactics evolved. The missions changed. But the basic principle remained. When fighting got close, when corridors were narrow, when darkness hid the enemy, nothing cleared a space like a 12-gauge loaded with buckshot, and the German protest became a dark joke. A footnote that soldiers told each other in foxholes and bunkers. The country that invented modern chemical warfare complained about a duck gun. The army that burned men alive thought buckshot was too cruel. Pause for a moment and think about what that actually means. In 4 years of industrial slaughter, the weapon that frightened Germany most was not the tank, not the airplane, not the submarine. It was a pump-action shotgun designed by John Browning for American hunters. 54 pellets in 2 seconds. That was enough to make an empire file a formal diplomatic protest. That was enough to make them threaten executions. That was enough to make hardened soldiers choose surrender over combat. The Winchester Model 1897 is no longer in military service. Modern combat shotguns have replaced it, but the design principles remain the same. The psychology remains the same. When soldiers need to clear a room, they still reach for a shotgun. And somewhere in that lineage is a September day in 1918, a formal document passing through Swiss diplomatic channels, a threat of execution, an American refusal, and 44 days later, silence on the Western Front. John Browning designed his shotgun for hunting birds. He could not have imagined what it would become. He could not have predicted that his duck gun would terrify a generation of German soldiers, that it would prompt the only execution threat of the entire war, that it would still be killing enemies 50 years after his death. The trench sweeper, the trench broom, the devil's weapon. Just a shotgun. If this story was worth your time, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to show this video to more people who care about history. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you do not miss what we cover next. And leave a comment. Where are you watching from right now? And here is a question. What other so-called primitive weapons do you think we should cover? Bows in medieval warfare? Bayonets? Knives? Let us know. These stories deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching.